Stillwater Boys by Eric Shaw. Dean McNeely knew the old Ford would start, but only if you turned the key with just the right touch, gentle until the click, then a hard twist while tapping the dash twice with your left fist. His father had taught him this, along with every other trick for coaxing life from things most men would consider dead. The pickup coughed, shuddered, then settled into a familiar rumble. 15 years after Robert McNeely's passing, his rituals still governed Dean's hands. The thought sat sour in his throat as he watched dust devils dance across what remained of his ranch. It was Tuesday when the letter arrived, folded in thirds inside a cream-colored envelope with McNeely typed neatly in the center window. The Enid law firm's embossed return address gave it weight before Dean even held it. He'd read it standing at the mailbox, squinting against afternoon sun, boots planted in Oklahoma dirt that had grown more dust than grass these past 3 seasons. Upon the passing of 15 years, the letter began, going on to explain something Dean could scarcely comprehend. His father, a man so direct he could dismiss you with just the angle of his chin, had left instructions sealed away until now. One final delivery, one last task before the full inheritance could transfer. One journey that required both sons together in Robert's old blue pickup. Both sons. The words made Dean's jaw tighten. "You need to contact Calvin McNeely," the letter stated, as if this were simple, as if 10 years of silence could be undone with a phone call. As if Cal hadn't chosen whiskey and highways over home, betraying everything their father had built, betraying Dean himself in ways neither had ever spoken aloud. Cal answered on the 3rd ring. "Yeah?" The voice was sandpaper rough but unmistakable. Dean cleared his throat. "It's me." A long silence stretched between Oklahoma and Arkansas. Dean heard truck engines in the background, the beep of something backing up. "Dad left something," Dean said. "Can't get it unless we both show up." Another silence. Then, "When?" "Soon as you can get here. I've got the ranch still, what's left of it." "I know where it is." A pause. "Might take me a couple days." Dean nodded at no one. "Fine." He'd nearly hung up when Cal added, "I'm 2 months clean." Dean didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing, which was the McNeely way. Cal looked older but somehow softer around the edges when he pulled into the yard 3 days later. Still lean, still wearing trucker caps pulled low, but the permanent clench in his shoulders had eased. He carried only a small duffel and an empty ceramic travel mug with Pilot Travel Center printed on the side. They didn't hug. Dean noticed Cal's eyes move over the property, taking in the peeling paint on the barn, the empty cattle pens, the way the drought had turned the horizon brown. He saw Cal clock the for sale sign Dean had leaned against the side of the house, not yet committed to planting it in the front yard. "Place looks the same," Cal said finally. "Looks worse," Dean answered. They loaded the truck according to the letter's instructions, a pine toolbox full of their father's hand tools secured in the bed, a cedar chest, locked with a key that would await them at delivery, strapped down under a tarp. "Any idea what's in it?" Cal asked. Dean shook his head. "Something he thought was worth more than telling us about." The woman they were to deliver to lived 3 counties south, in a town called Marlow. June Bledsoe. The name meant nothing to either of them. 5-6 hours with stops," Dean said, settling behind the wheel. "We can be back by dark." Cal looked at him with something like disappointment. "That simple, huh?" Dean turned the key. Gentle click, hard twist, 2 taps. and the old Ford coughed to life. They drove in silence for the first 40 miles. Not the comfortable silence of men who understand each other, but the burdened quiet of those who've rehearsed too many versions of the same conversation and can't decide which script to follow. Cal kept his gaze on the landscape sliding past, flat expanses broken by occasional pump jacks nodding like giant insects feeding on the plains. Dean kept both hands on the wheel, posture rigid. Sarah left. Dean said finally, the words coming out unpracticed. 3 years back? Cal nodded slow. Heard about it. Darla's cousin works at that hair salon in Enid. Dean tried to calculate the effort it would take to be angry that his brother knew about his divorce without ever calling. He found himself too tired for the math. You seeing anybody? Cal asked after a mile. No time, Dean lied. Right. The old pickup rattled over a cattle guard. Dean downshifted out of habit, the muscle memory of 1,000 trips down these same roads. You mind if I turn the radio on? Cal asked. Dean shrugged. Cal reached over, his fingers finding the knob like they remembered its location. Static gave way to a country station playing something new and unfamiliar. Cal left it low, just loud enough to fill the spaces where words should be. In Enid, they stopped for gas. Cal disappeared inside and returned with 2 coffees and a small paper sack. Still take it black? He asked, holding out a cup. Dean nodded, surprised. Got you these, too. Cal handed over the sack. Inside were 2 honey buns, still in their packaging. Dean's favorite from when they were boys. Figured some things don't change, Cal said, something tentative in his voice. It was the first kindness between them, small as a stone, but just as real. Dean tore the wrapper with his teeth like he used to, and they ate leaning against the truck, watching cars pull in and out of the station. Cal reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bronze medallion, turning it over between his fingers. 2 months. Dean recognized the sobriety chip from when their cousin Mike had gotten clean. One day at a time, Cal said, half to himself, putting the chip away. That's what they tell us. Don't think about forever. Just today. That working? Dean asked, not looking at him. Some days. Cal took a sip of coffee. Better than what I was doing before. Dean nodded, acknowledging the effort that represented. You ever think about it? Cal asked suddenly. That night, before I left. Dean's jaw locked. No point. There's a point. Cal's voice had a new steadiness to it. Part of the program. Making amends. That your sobriety talking? Maybe. Cal looked at him directly. Does it matter? Dean wadded up the honey bun wrapper, stuffed it in his pocket. Some things don't need words. Yeah, Cal sighed. That's what I always thought, too. South of Enid, the land opened wider. Vast wheat fields, rust-colored grassland, farmhouses set back from the highway like freckles on sunburned skin. They passed through towns with populations smaller than graduating classes in cities. Bison, Drummond, Lahoma. Names that existed now mostly as green signs appearing and disappearing on the roadside. You remember when Dad used to drive us down to the stockyards in Oklahoma City? Cal asked, breaking another long silence. Dean nodded. Once a month. Always stopped at that place with the pie. Cattleman's, Cal supplied. Cherry pie with ice cream melting on top. He'd only let us get it if the cattle sold high, which they always did. Dean glanced over. He'd put the money in the bank before we ate. Never said how much. Cal laughed softly. That was Dad, making sure we knew there was a price for everything good. His smile faded, even if he wouldn't tell us what it was. The old bitterness in his voice made Dean grip the wheel tighter. There was always this with Cal, a questioning of things Dean had simply accepted, their father's silences, his expectations, the way love was expressed through work and provision rather than words. He kept the ranch going, Dean said. Fed us, clothed us, even after Mom died. I know that, Cal said quietly. I know. Near Kingfisher, they picked up a hitchhiker, an old man with a canvas bag and boots so worn the leather had taken the exact shape of his feet. He introduced himself as Ellis, no last name. Said he was heading to El Reno to see his sister, though something in his eyes suggested there might not be a sister anymore, or at least not one expecting him. He rode in the narrow back seat of the extended cab, hat in his lap, occasionally offering observations about the fields they passed, or memories of when this stretch of highway was just packed dirt. You boys are brothers, he said suddenly, not a question. Dean nodded in the rear view. Same eyes, Ellis explained. Same way of keeping quiet. Cal turned in his seat. You got brothers? Had 3, Ellis said. One died in Korea. One in his bed in Tulsa. One still out there somewhere driving truck. Haven't seen him since '82. You miss him? Cal asked. Ellis looked out the window. Miss the idea of him, I suppose. Memory gets kinder than the man ever was. Dean felt Cal's eyes on him, but kept his own on the road. Blood's a funny thing, Ellis continued. Binds you to people you might not choose if God gave you the picking. But there's something to it. Something in knowing there's another person walking around with the same beginning as you. Not the same ending, though, Dean said, surprising himself. Ellis nodded thoughtfully. Number. That's the hard truth of it. Same blood, different roads. They dropped Ellis at a diner in El Reno. He offered them $5 for gas, which they refused. Before walking away, he touched the hood of the pickup gently, as if blessing it. As he turned toward the diner entrance, he paused and looked back at them. Brothers are born in blood, but built in time, he said quietly, then disappeared inside. Cal watched the diner door swing shut. What do you think he meant by that? Dean shrugged. Just an old man talking. But the words hung between them as they drove on, through Minco and Pocasset and Chickasha, towns that had once been something more, now just collections of buildings with fewer people each year, farming communities where farms were increasingly rare. Somewhere south of Chickasha, Cal spoke again. I should have called when Sarah left. Dean kept his eyes on the road. Wouldn't have changed anything. No, but still, I thought about it. Why didn't you? Cal was quiet a moment. Thought you might hang up. The simple truth of this, that Dean might have done exactly that, settled between them with the weight of a confession. First step is admitting you're powerless, Cal said. Second is believing something bigger than yourself can restore you. He stared out the window. Hardest part was figuring out what that something bigger was. Dean glanced over. What did you decide on? Cal's mouth quirked. Not quite a smile. Started with spite, then sunrise. Now, I don't know. Maybe just the chance to fix what I broke. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was honesty. And between McNeely men, that was rarer than gold. The sign welcoming them to Marlow was faded, the population number sun-bleached to near invisibility. The attorney's instructions directed them to a property 3 miles east of town, down a gravel road lined with hackberry trees grown wild along fence lines. The farmhouse sat back from the road, white clapboard with a wide front porch. A hand-painted sign near the driveway read, "Bledsoe House, Veterans Welcome." Several cars were parked in a graveled area to the side, and Dean could see a vegetable garden stretching behind the house. A woman stood waiting on the porch as they pulled in, as if she'd been watching for them. Mid-60s, maybe, silver hair cut practically short, wearing jeans and a chambray work shirt with the sleeves rolled up. She didn't smile as they approached, just studied them with careful eyes. "You Roberts boys," she said, a statement rather than a question. Dean nodded, extending his hand. "Dean McNeely. This is my brother Cal." "June Bledsoe." Her handshake was firm. "Been expecting you for a while now." "You knew our father?" Cal asked. Something flickered across her face. "Long time ago, before he met your mother." She looked past them to the truck. "That his old Ford?" Dean nodded. "Still runs," she noted, something like approval in her voice. "He always could make things last." She gestured toward the house. "Come on in. I'll put on coffee, then we'll get to whatever Robert thought was so important." The inside of the house was simple but well kept. A large common room held mismatched furniture arranged in conversational groupings. A bulletin board on one wall displayed notices for VA benefits, AA meetings, job listings. Through an open door, Dean glimpsed a dining room with a long table that could seat 12. "It's a halfway house," June explained, catching his look. "For veterans, mostly. Some just out of prison. Men who need a place while they figure out their next step." She led them to a small kitchen at the back of the house. 2 men were playing cards at a table by the window. They nodded respectfully at June but didn't interrupt their game. "Robert helped me buy this place," June said, measuring coffee into a percolator. "Sent a check about 20 years ago. No note, just the money. Enough for the down payment." Dean and Cal exchanged looks. "We didn't know," Dean said. June shrugged. "No reason you would." She set out 3 mugs. "I wrote to thank him. He never answered, but the property taxes get paid every year. Came out of his account, still does." Cal leaned against the counter. "How did you know him?" June's hands stilled momentarily. "We grew up together, over in Stillwater. Went to school together from first grade on." She paused. "We were engaged before he went to Vietnam. When he came back, he was different. Said he wasn't the man who'd made those promises." She looked out the window, her voice softening. "I waited 2 years for that man to come home. When he finally did, I barely recognized his eyes." Her fingers traced a small scar on her wrist, seemingly unconsciously. "Some nights I still wake up wondering if I should have fought harder for him, if I could have reached whatever part of him was still there." Dean tried to reconcile this with the father he'd known. Stern, closed off, reliable in his routines if not his affections. A man who'd rarely mentioned his time in the war, except to say it had taught him the value of American soil. "He met your mother about a year later," June continued, composing herself. "I moved on too, eventually. Never married, but I built a life." She gestured around the kitchen. "Found my purpose here." The percolator began to bubble. June turned away to tend to it, perhaps to hide whatever might be showing on her face. "Why the delivery now?" Cal asked. Why wait 15 years after he died? June poured the coffee, buying time with the motion. That, she said finally, I expect we'll find out together. They brought in the toolbox first. June ran her hand over it, recognizing it. He made this in high school, shop class. Her fingers traced the dovetail joints. Always had good hands. The cedar chest required both brothers to carry. They set it on the kitchen table, the men with the card game having quietly disappeared. June produced a small key from her pocket. This came in the mail last week. From the same law firm, I expect. Dean and Cal stood back as she unlocked the chest. The hinges creaked softly as she lifted the lid. Inside, carefully packed, were letters. Dozens of them, bound with faded ribbon. Beneath these, a small wooden box, a leather-bound journal, and a service medal in a blue case. June lifted out the top bundle of letters. The paper had yellowed with age, but the handwriting was clear, their father's distinctive angular script. She untied the ribbon and opened the top letter, her eyes moving over words meant for her alone. Dean looked away, feeling suddenly like an intruder. Cal studied the floor. As the moment lengthened, Dean found himself remembering his father at the workbench in the barn, hands moving steadily over a piece of maple, sanding with the grain. Not speaking, but showing, guiding Dean's small hands until they learned the feel of the wood. The memory came unbidden. His father folding a note to his mother once, creasing it precisely with his thumbnail, a tenderness in the gesture that had seemed out of place on those calloused hands. After a long moment, June spoke, her voice steady but softer. He wrote these in Vietnam, never sent them. She carefully refolded the letter. Said things here he never could say out loud, I expect. She reached for the wooden box next, opening it to reveal a simple ring with a small stone. My engagement ring. I returned it when he broke things off. June lifted the small wooden box again, opening it to reveal the engagement ring. She touched it with a fingertip, her composure finally cracking. All these years he kept it. Her voice wavered slightly. 15 years he's been gone, and part of me is still waiting for him to walk through that door and explain himself. She closed the box with care and placed it back in the chest. I never stopped loving him, even when I hated what the war did to him. She looked up at the brothers, her eyes bright with unshed tears. That's the hardest part about loving a McNeely man, I expect. They never let you all the way in, but you can't find your way all the way out either. She took a deep breath and began repacking the chest. These stay with me. The letter and journal are yours. She closed the lid gently. Robert was a complicated man. Whatever he didn't give you, and I expect there was plenty, wasn't because he didn't carry it inside him. The journal she left closed. That's his war diary. Said in his letter to the attorneys that you boys should have it. Said there were things you should know. Cal looked up sharply. There's a letter? June nodded, reaching into her pocket and withdrawing a sealed envelope. For both of you. He asked that you read it together after you'd made the delivery. Dean took it, the paper somehow heavy in his hand. Their father's name was written on the back of the envelope, nothing more. They sat in the truck in June's driveway, the unopened letter between them on the bench seat, the journal on the dashboard. Neither made a move to read either one. We could wait, Cal suggested. Read it back at the ranch. Dean shook his head. This is where he wanted it done. Cal nodded. After another moment, he reached for the letter, tore it open carefully, and unfolded a single sheet of paper. He handed it to Dean. "You read it." Dean hesitated, then took it. He recognized the handwriting immediately, the same hand that had signed permission slips and checks, the same hand that had gripped his shoulder the day of his mother's funeral, the only time he'd ever seen his father cry. He cleared his throat and began, "Dean and Calvin, if you're reading this, you've done what I asked. Thank you for that. I know it couldn't have been easy, considering how things were left between you. The ranch and what money I had goes to Dean, as you both know. He stayed, did the work, carried the load. That's only fair. But there are other inheritances, things a father should give his sons that I never managed. The truth is one of them. June Bledsoe was the love of my life. What I felt for your mother was real, but different. When I came back from Vietnam, I was broken in ways I couldn't name. Couldn't bear to bring that darkness to June. Your mother understood darkness already. She'd lost her parents young, and somehow that made it possible for us to build something together. I was not the father you deserved. I know that. Kept too much inside. Demanded too much. Said too little. The war taught me that survival meant keeping your head down and your mouth shut. Took that lesson too much to heart. The journal tells the rest. About the war, about the nightmares, about why I couldn't bear to see you boys fight. Read it or burn it. That's your choice. What I want you to know is this. The best things I ever did were you two. Different as you are. Stubborn as you both can be. You're better men than I managed to be. The other thing I never said, I'm proud of you both. Always have been. Whatever broke between you, fix it. Life's too short, and family's too rare to waste either one. Dad. Dean finished reading, his voice thick. He folded the letter carefully and passed it to Cal, who stared at it for a long moment before tucking it into his shirt pocket. They sat in silence as the afternoon light began to soften toward evening. Finally, Cal spoke. He knew we weren't speaking, back when he was dying. Dean nodded. Must have, and he waited 15 years to try to fix it. Sounds about right, Dean said, a hint of the old bitterness returning. Cal reached for the journal on the dash, but didn't open it. You think there's really answers in here? Don't know that I need answers anymore, Dean said. Maybe just understanding. Cal nodded slowly. Yeah. Something in the quality of their silence had changed. Not comfortable yet, but no longer quite so suffocating. Dean started the truck. Gentle, click, hard twist, 2 taps, and the engine caught immediately. He backed out of the driveway and pointed them north, toward home. They rode in silence for several miles, but it was Cal who finally spoke. You still got that old barn fridge that keeps beer cold? Dean glanced over. Still works. Kept the NA stuff around? For visitors? Got some, Dean said. Then, after a pause, been drinking it myself lately. Cal turned to look at him fully. Yeah? Dean shrugged. Figure I'd see how it feels. Cal nodded, understanding the unspoken. Feels different. Takes getting used to. They drove on as twilight began to settle across the plains. The journal rested between them, still unopened. There would be time for that. Maybe tonight, maybe another day. Just outside of Chickasha, Dean pulled over at a roadside park. Just a picnic table and a trash can beneath a stunted oak tree. He cut the engine, You want to drive for a while? He asked. Cal looked surprised. You never let anyone drive this truck. Well, Dean said, holding out the keys. Maybe some things do change. Cal took the keys after a moment. As they got out to swap places, Dean noticed Cal touch something in his pocket, a small medallion that he turned once between his fingers before climbing behind the wheel. The truck's doors creaked in familiar harmony as they closed. Before Cal started the engine, he looked over. I'm staying at a motel in Enid, he said, but I could come out to the ranch tomorrow. Help with some repairs maybe before I head back. Dean hesitated, then said, Sarah didn't leave because of the ranch failing. The admission came out rough. She left because I wouldn't talk about anything that mattered. Said it was like living with a ghost. Cal nodded slowly. Sounds familiar. I'm seeing someone now. Counselor in Enid, trying to... Dean trailed off, unsure how to finish. Yeah, Cal said simply. Me too. Different kind of counselor, but same idea. Dean nodded, something easing in his chest. Ranch doesn't look so good, but the spare room's still there. If you wanted to stay. Yeah, Cal said, the word carrying more than its single syllable. That'd be all right. Cal turned the key, gentle click, hard twist. But before he could finish the ritual, Dean reached over and tapped the dash twice with his fist. The engine caught, rumbled to life. Cal gave a small smile. Some things you don't forget. They pulled back onto the highway, the Oklahoma twilight deepening around them. Just outside of town, they passed a small diner with a neon sign flickering homemade pie in the window. Hey, Cal said, nodding toward it. You hungry? Dean looked at the diner, then at his brother. Yeah, he said. I could eat. Cal signaled and turned the truck into the gravel lot. As they walked toward the entrance, Dean noticed how the setting sun lit the diner's windows amber, the same color as the wheat fields that had surrounded their childhood home, the same light that had filtered through their father's workshop where he'd built the pine toolbox. After all these years, some things remained. The bell above the diner door rang as they entered. Inside, a jukebox glowed in the corner, playing a Hank Williams song their mother used to hum while hanging laundry. The brothers exchanged a glance, recognition passing between them without words. They slid into a booth. Two men walking side by side, not yet comfortable, not quite strangers.